I never thought lightning could keep someone awake for months, but that's exactly what happened to me that night in March 2023. My name is Jake Mitchell, I'm 42 years old, and I've been a Boeing 777 captain for 8 years. I've logged over 12,000 flight hours, been through turbulence that would make a sailor seasick, and landed in conditions that would challenge any flight manual. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on United Flight 447 from Los Angeles to Miami. It was a Tuesday, March 14th, and the check-in had been routine. I was scheduled as captain, accompanied by First Officer Ryan Thompson, a sharp 29-year-old I'd flown with several times before. Ryan was the kind of first officer you want beside you, competent, calm, and always attentive to details. Our aircraft was N787UA, a Boeing 777-300ER with only 4 years since manufacturing, impeccable maintenance record. The weather briefing indicated some isolated thunderstorm cells over the Atlantic, but nothing unusual for the route. Planned cruise altitude at 37,000 feet, estimated flight time 8 hours and 45 minutes. We had 312 passengers on board, including 28 children, and a cabin crew of 14. Total takeoff weight, 347 tons. Takeoff from LAX was smooth. It was 9:35 p.m. when we released the brakes on runway 25R. The 777 responded beautifully as always. In 45 seconds we were airborne, climbing toward the ocean. Ryan took the controls right after takeoff. It was his leg as pilot flying. Los Angeles departure United 447 Heavy, leaving 2000 for 5000, heading 090, I transmitted over the radio. United 447 Heavy, Los Angeles departure, roger. Continue climb to flight level 370, heading 075 to intercept J146. Everything absolutely normal. Autopilot was engaged at 1,500 feet, and the aircraft climbed smoothly through scattered cloud layers. By 10:15 p.m., we were at FL 370, 37,000 feet altitude, flying over the ocean in visual conditions. The lights of the California coast were still visible as small golden dots on the horizon. Oakland Center, United 447 Heavy, level 370, estimating BOIST at 0231 Zulu, I transmitted to Oceanic Control. United 447 Heavy, Oakland Center, roger. Report BIST and maintain guard on frequency 128.85. Ryan was relaxed. We were chatting about family, vacation plans. He'd just gotten married and was planning a honeymoon in Europe. I joked that on a first officer's salary, he'd have to skip the in-flight cocktails to afford the trip. It was a typical red-eye oceanic flight. Quiet, peaceful, almost meditative. The constant hum of the Rolls-Royce Trent 892 engines, the soft glow of cockpit instruments, the crystal-clear stars in the clean sky. Moments like these reminded me why I fell in love with aviation. At 11:42 p.m., everything changed. We were overflying an area of moderate electrical activity. Nothing alarming, just some distant flashes on the horizon, typical for this latitude. Weather radar showed yellow cells about 30 miles to our right, but our route was clear. "Jake, you seeing those flashes at 2 o'clock?" asked Ryan, pointing to the right side of the aircraft. "Yeah, but we're well clear. Radar shows everything's clean ahead." That's when I heard the sound, a sharp crack like a whip cutting through air, followed by a blinding flash that lit up the entire cockpit. For a split second, I completely lost my vision. The smell of ozone invaded the cabin. "What the hell was that?" Ryan shouted. Before I could answer, the alarm started. First one, then two, then a deafening symphony of beeps, warning tones, and red lights flashing across the entire panel. "Master warning, hydraulic system 1, fail. Master warning, hydraulic system 2, fail. Master warning, hydraulic system 3, fail." My heart stopped. 3 hydraulic systems failing simultaneously? That was theoretically impossible. The Boeing 777 was designed with triple redundancy, specifically to prevent this situation. "Ryan, you have the aircraft now," I shouted, while starting to run through emergency checklists. But when Ryan tried to move the yoke, his expression changed completely. "Jake, the yoke's not responding. I can't control the aircraft." That's when reality hit me like a punch to the gut. The lightning had struck our aircraft and somehow impossibly destroyed all 3 hydraulic systems completely. We were flying 180 tons of metal at 37,000 feet, with no flight controls. For those unfamiliar with aviation, let me explain the gravity of the situation. An aircraft's hydraulic system is what allows you to move all the control surfaces: ailerons, rudder, elevators, spoilers, flaps, landing gear, brakes. It's like the aircraft's circulatory system. Without it, you basically have a 180-ton projectile flying at nearly 600 miles per hour. Oakland Center, United 447 Heavy, declaring emergency. Total hydraulic system failure after lightning strike. Request immediate vector to nearest suitable airport. The controller's voice came back several seconds later, professional but clearly concerned. United 447 Heavy, emergency copied. Phoenix is 180 nautical miles, heading 240. Las Vegas, 220 miles, heading 270. What are your intentions? What were my intentions? My intention was not to die, not to let 312 people die, and somehow manage to land an aircraft with no controls. Ryan, help me with the checklists. Let's see if we can recover at least one system. We started working frantically. The Boeing 777 emergency manual has procedures for one hydraulic system failure, two systems, but not for all three simultaneously. Technically, it was an uncertified situation, meaning a situation for which no approved procedure existed. Meanwhile, the aircraft began exhibiting strange behavior. Without active hydraulic systems, the control surfaces became locked in their last position. Fortunately, we were in level flight when the lightning struck us, so the controls were in neutral position. But here was the problem. Even with surfaces neutral, small air disturbances would start affecting the aircraft, and without correction capability, we'd eventually enter an unrecoverable attitude. "Jake, we still have engine control," Ryan observed, and it was like a light bulb went off in my mind. The engines. In extreme situations like this, some pilots had managed to control aircraft using only engine power variation. Increasing power on the right engine, the aircraft would tend to turn left. Reducing power on both, the nose would drop. It was like trying to drive a car using only the accelerator without a steering wheel. Oakland Center, United 447 Heavy. We're going to attempt aircraft control through engines only. Request vectors to Phoenix and full emergency preparation at the airport. United 447 Heavy, understood. Phoenix being alerted. Fire trucks and emergency crews moving into position. Advise your fuel situation. I looked at the fuel indicator. We'd left Los Angeles with fuel sufficient for Miami Plus reserves. But now 200 miles from Phoenix, and not knowing how long it would take to get there using only engines for navigation, every pound of fuel was precious. "Fuel sufficient for approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes, I replied. I started experimenting with the engines. I slightly reduced power on the left engine. The aircraft made a gentle turn to the left, increased it again. It returned to heading. It worked, but it was like trying to write using a pen tied to the end of a fishing rod. "Ryan, you handle radio and checklists. I'm going to try navigating with engines." What happened in the next 40 minutes was the most intense experience of my life. Every power adjustment had to be calculated, smooth, gradual, too abrupt, and the aircraft could enter an unrecoverable situation. Too slow and we couldn't change heading. Navigation was a nightmare. Normally, to fly from our position to Phoenix, I'd simply program the autopilot and the aircraft would follow the route automatically. Now I had to mentally calculate every heading change, considering wind, aircraft speed, and slow response to engine commands. United 447 Heavy, you're approximately 40 degrees right of course for Phoenix. Need correction to the left. I reduced right engine power to 85%, kept the left at 90%. Slowly, very slowly, the aircraft started turning left. Meanwhile, Ryan was checking all systems that still worked. Communication. Okay. Engines, running perfectly. Electrical systems, normal. Pressurization, normal. But without hydraulics, we wouldn't have landing gear, brakes, spoilers, thrust reversers, nothing we needed for a safe landing. "Jake," Ryan called me, his voice strangely calm. "I just calculated our approach speed. Without flaps, we're going to land at least 200 knots. 200 knots, that's almost 230 miles per hour. A normal 777 landing is done at about 150 knots. We were talking about an impact 50% faster than normal in an aircraft without brakes. What's the length of Phoenix's runway? I asked. Runway 8R26L is 11,500 feet. I did a quick mental calculation. At 200 knots, without brakes and without reverse thrust, we'd need at least 13,000 feet to stop. Phoenix had 11,500. Not gonna work, I said quietly. What did you say? It's not gonna work, Ryan. Phoenix's runway is too short. We'll go off the end and, well, you know what happens. There was silence in the cockpit. The engine hum seemed louder, more ominous. Through the headphones, I could hear Ryan's accelerated breathing. What now? He asked. Now we find an alternative. I grabbed the microphone. Oakland Center, United 447 Heavy. Need information on alternate airports. Phoenix may not have sufficient runway for our emergency landing. United 447 Heavy standby, checking alternatives. While we waited, I started thinking about other options. Denver had a longer runway, 12,000 feet. Still not ideal, but better. Dallas had 13,400 feet, that might work. Salt Lake City had 12,000 feet, but was too far. United 447 Heavy, we have information on Denver. Runway 16R34L with 12,000 feet. Winds calm, visual conditions. Distance approximately 280 nautical miles from your current position. 280 nautical miles. That was roughly 320 miles. With our reduced speed due to engine maneuvering, it would take at least another 50 minutes to get there. I looked at fuel again, 52 minutes remaining. It was tight, but possible. Oakland Center, United 447 Heavy electing Denver. Request vectoring and full emergency preparation. United 447 Heavy, understood. Denver being alerted. For Denver, heading 300. Again, I started the process of changing heading using only engines. This time I needed a bigger turn, almost 90 degrees to the right. I increased left engine power to 95% and reduced right to 80%. The aircraft responded, but slowly. It was like steering a ship. You move the rudder and wait minutes to see the result. Every correction had to be anticipated, calculated, smooth. Ryan, call out every 10 degrees of heading change. Current heading 240, 250, 260. Slowly, very slowly, we were turning toward Denver, but fuel kept dropping. 45 minutes, 42 minutes, 38 minutes. That's when Ryan made a discovery that would change everything. Jake, look at this. He was pointing to a side panel we rarely check during normal flight. Manual reversion flight control is available. Manual reversion is a backup system that allows moving some control surfaces through steel cables without hydraulics. It's extremely limited, heavy to operate, but functional. You sure about that? Positive. Look here, manual reversion available. For the first time in almost an hour, I felt a spark of hope. With manual reversion control, we could have at least some control over the aircraft during approach and landing. It wouldn't be easy. It would be like trying to fly a 1940s aircraft, but it was infinitely better than using only engines. Let's test it, I said, disengaging the autopilot that was struggling to keep the aircraft level. I grabbed the yoke and tried a small input to the right. There was enormous resistance. It was like trying to bend an iron bar, but the aircraft responded. Slowly, but it responded. It works, I shouted, and for the first time since the lightning strike, Ryan smiled. But our joy was short-lived. The manual system allowed limited control of ailerons and rudder, but not elevators, which control pitch up and down, nor flaps, nor landing gear. We'd still have to use engines for pitch control and make a gear-up landing, a belly landing, in a 180-ton aircraft at 200 knots. United 447 Heavy, Denver approach. We have you on radar, 180 miles southeast. Descend when ready to 10,000 feet. Fire trucks and emergency crews in position. Runway 34L in use, winds calm. Denver approach United 447, Heavy beginning descent to 10,000. The descent would be another challenge. Normally, to descend, we simply reduce engine power and adjust elevators to maintain speed. But without elevator control, reducing power would make the nose drop uncontrollably, dangerously increasing our speed. I had to find a delicate balance, Reduce power enough to descend, but not so much that we lost speed control. Ryan, monitor airspeed. If it goes past 350 knots, let me know immediately. I started gradually reducing power. 90%, 85%, 80%. The nose began dropping and we started a gentle descent. Speed climbing, 300 knots, 320, 340. Jake, 350 knots. I increased power back to 85%. Speed stabilized at 345 knots, too fast for a normal descent but controllable. During the descent, I took advantage to do something I should have done much earlier, notify the passengers. I activated the interphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Jake Mitchell. We're experiencing a technical issue that requires us to make an emergency landing in Denver. Our control systems were affected by an electrical discharge, but the aircraft is stable and under control. The landing will be different from normal. Please follow your flight attendant's instructions carefully. Stay calm and prepare for the emergency position when requested. Through the cockpit door, I could hear murmurs and some muffled screams from passengers. The lead flight attendant, Maria, a veteran with 15 years' experience, appeared at the cockpit door. Captain, I need to know exactly what we're facing. How do I prepare the passengers? Maria, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We're going to do a belly landing. The aircraft will touch the runway without landing gear. It's going to be a hard impact, with lots of friction and probably sparks. Prepare everyone for brace position and make sure they know where the emergency exits are. She nodded and returned to the cabin. I heard her voice over the PA system explaining emergency procedures to passengers, demonstrating the protective position. Her voice was calm, professional. At that moment, I felt grateful to have such a competent crew. United 447 Heavy, descending through 15,000 feet, Denver in sight. There it was. Denver's lights shining in the darkness, runway 34L perfectly illuminated, stretching for almost 2.5 miles. Fire trucks positioned on both sides of the runway, their red and blue lights flashing like a macabre Christmas display. Ryan, let's review the emergency landing procedure one last time. No flaps approach at 200 knots, engines cut only at touchdown, immediate evacuation, he recited. Exactly. And remember, at touchdown, I cut engines and you activate all engine fire bottles. We don't want friction to cause fire. I was on base leg for runway 34L, 8 miles from the threshold, 3,000 feet altitude. Fuel 12 minutes. We cut it close, but we made it. Denver Tower, United 447 Heavy, base leg runway 34L requesting extended final for configuration. United 447 Heavy, Denver Tower, runway 34L cleared to land, winds calm, emergency crews standing by. Good luck. Good luck. I was going to need more than luck. I started the turn to final using manual aileron control. It was extremely heavy. Felt like trying to turn the steering wheel of a truck without power steering. But it worked. The aircraft responded and aligned with the runway. 5 miles from touchdown, 2,000 feet altitude. Speed 220 knots. Still too fast, but the minimum I could maintain without losing lift. Ryan announced to the cabin, "Brace position now." I heard Maria's voice over the interphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, brace position. Head down, arms crossed." 3 miles, 2,500 feet, 210 knots. The runway was growing rapidly in the windscreen. It looked like a highway to hell all lit up. 2 miles, 1,000 feet, 205 knots. I reduced engine power a bit more. The nose dropped slightly. 1 mile, 500 feet, 200 knots. It was now or never. Ryan, prepare to cut engines on my command. The runway threshold passed beneath us. 200 feet, 150, 150. Cutting engines, fire bottles. The sudden silence when the engines were cut was deafening. For a few seconds, we heard only the sound of wind passing over the aircraft. We were gliding, a 180-ton rock falling toward the asphalt. The touchdown was indescribable. The first impact was on the aft part of the fuselage, a metallic crash that echoed throughout the aircraft, immediately followed by the friction of metal against asphalt. Enormous sparks started flying past the cabin sides. It looked like we were inside a giant welding machine. The aircraft slid down the runway in a cacophony of tearing metal, sparks, and the acrid smell of superheated aluminum. The nose was still in the air. We were sliding like a monstrous sled. After about 5 eternal seconds, the nose also touched the ground. More crashing, more sparks, more noise. The deceleration was brutal. We were thrown against our harnesses with a force that knocked the breath out of me. But we were decelerating. Speed dropped from 200 knots to 150, 120, 100, 80, 60. And finally, after what seemed like hours but was only 45 seconds, we stopped. We were sitting in the middle of runway 34L at Denver International Airport, in a destroyed but intact aircraft, with 314 people alive. The silence that followed was broken by Ryan's voice. "Jake, we did it." I couldn't answer. I was in shock, shaking, with tears running down my face. We had just done the impossible. United 447 Heavy, Denver Tower. Status of crew and passengers. It took me several seconds to be able to speak. Denver Tower, United 447 Heavy. Aircraft stopped on runway. Everyone's okay. Beginning emergency evacuation. The next few minutes were a blur. Emergency slides were deployed, and in less than 2 minutes all 312 passengers and 16 crew members were off the aircraft. There were some minor injuries, a few scrapes, one broken arm, but nothing serious. When I finally exited the aircraft, my knees gave out. I sat on the asphalt next to what had been N787 UA and cried. I cried from relief, from exhaustion, from gratitude for being alive. Ryan sat down beside me. We stayed there for a few minutes, just looking at the destroyed aircraft. The bottom was completely scraped away, the cargo compartment doors were open and twisted, but she had brought us home. "You know something, Jake," Ryan said. "I think I'm going to request a transfer to domestic flights." We laughed. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, sitting there on the Denver tarmac at 2:30 a.m., next to an aircraft that technically shouldn't have been able to land. The subsequent investigation revealed that lightning had struck the aircraft at a specific point where all 3 main hydraulic circuits passed, a 1 in 10 million probability. The Boeing 777 was declared a total loss, but all 314 people on board survived. Today, almost 2 years later, I still fly. I still love aviation, but every time I see lightning on the horizon, my heart speeds up a little. Every time I do a weather briefing, I pay extra attention to electrical activity because I learned that sometimes, no matter how well trained you are, no matter how modern your equipment is, no matter how many redundant systems you have, sometimes the only thing between you and disaster is your knowledge, your composure, and maybe a little luck. That night we had all 3. Ryan, by the way, didn't request a transfer to domestic flights. Actually, he was promoted to captain 6 months later and now flies international routes. We say that if we could land a 777 without controls, any other emergency is going to seem like a piece of cake. And N787 UA? Well, she fulfilled her mission. She brought us home when it seemed impossible. She was scrapped, but some parts were sent to Boeing for studies on improving lightning protection systems. Sometimes, when I'm on a quiet night flight, I look through the cockpit windows at the stars and think, what a privilege this is to fly. And even after everything we went through, even after seeing how fragile our technology can be in the face of nature's forces, I still believe there's nowhere I'd rather be than here at 37,000 feet, with the whole world down below. Because flying isn't just about technology, it's not just about systems and procedures. Flying is about people, about trust, about teamwork, about never giving up, even when all the red lights are flashing and all the alarms are sounding. That March night, we learned that even when everything goes wrong, even when you're piloting 180 tons of metal with just 2 engines and a lot of determination, the impossible can become possible. And maybe that's the most important lesson I can share. Never underestimate the power of preparation, composure under pressure, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. Because up there at 37,000 feet, those qualities can make the difference between just another routine story and a miracle. If you enjoyed this story from the skies, subscribe to Black Box and hit that notification bell. We have many other pilot accounts who faced the impossible and lived to tell about it. And in the comments, tell me, Would you have the courage to keep fighting in a seemingly impossible situation like this? Aviation is full of unsung heroes who make the extraordinary seem routine, and their stories deserve to be told.